Hey guys, welcome to my new movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Clint Eastwood film Cry Macho. What's kind of unique about Cry Macho as opposed to some of his previous efforts in directing is this is kind of his return to the Western setting. And I know Clint Eastwood's known for pursuing that setting in his earlier years, and it's been a long time since Clint Eastwood has kind of used that setting in any of his movies. And so that was kind of the exciting part of the announcement of Cry Macho was him kind of returning to that setting and to that genre. And he's also done a lot of films over the years that have been based on true stories. And this is kind of his first film in a while too. This is kind of more of so a fictional story instead of a based on a true story kind of film. And so kind of a lot of cool things going into the movie. You know, back in the Western setting, Clint Eastwood directing and acting in it again. Um, not based on a true story for the first time in a long time. So a lot of things that I looked forward to in this movie. So let's kind of talk about the overall premise of Cry Macho before I give you my thoughts on it. Basically, what this film is about is Clint Eastwood plays a former rodeo star who kind of hasn't done anything big in a while. He's had some drinking issues, and a close friend of his that kind of wants him to clean up his act and get his life back on track asked him to kind of do him this huge favor because he kind of owes him that after a long time of not doing him any favors. And basically, he finds out that he has a son that lives down in Mexico. Him and the person he had the kid with aren't basically on good terms anymore with each other. There's some legal reasons as to why he can't go down to Mexico anymore and things like that. So basically, he's asking Clint Eastwood's character to go down there, track down his now teenage son, bring him back to the USA, let him kind of live on the ranch with him and things like that. He knows that he would probably live a better life with him than with the mom of than basically this person that he is the mom of this kid that he had, you know, that he's the father to. So basically, Clint gets down there, runs into problems. There's people that he runs into along the way that kind of make sure that he doesn't take this kid back to the U.S. with him. Cars get stolen. All these kind of issues come up. Also, there's a woman that they meet along the way on their journey that kind of has romantic feelings for Clint Eastwood's character, and so there's this whole romance blossoming between the two of them. And so all these things happen over the course of Cry Macho that kind of prevent Clint from dropping off this guy's kid to the U.S. sooner than he was hoping to. And he also kind of has to figure out what to do with this romantic relationship that he now has pursued with this woman down in Mexico and kind of where that might go from the future on and things like that. All that happens over the course of Cry Macho. So overall, guys, I thought this film was okay. Um, I'm one of those people where I love Clint Eastwood. I love him both as an actor and a director. But I got to be honest, not everything he's ever touched has turned to gold. Some of the films he's directed over the years, some films he's acted in over years, haven't been super great, unfortunately. But it's one of those things where when Clint Eastwood is in a great film, he's in a really, really great film. When he directs a good film, too, he directs a really, really good film. And I guess the another reason why I was so excited to see Cry Macho is his previous film, Richard Jewell from 2019. I absolutely loved. I thought it was one of his best films in years. One of my obviously I have numerous compliments about that movie, but one thing that was cool about that film that does luckily get transferred over to Cry Macho as well is he has a more colorful color palette this time around in his films and in the shots in his films. Because for the longest time, he always had like washed out looks to his movies. For those who ever saw the film Hereafter, that's probably the guiltiest movie of his as far as washing out all the colors go. There's just so many scenes where everything looks so washed out and the lights seem too bright and you can't read the subtitles, and there was so many issues with Hereafter. But so luckily, Cry Macho was, along with Richard Jewell, were the first two films of his in a while that don't wash out the color palette at all. And so, you know, long story short, I loved Richard Jewell in 2019. It was one of my favorite films of that year. So I kind of went into a lot of this film with a lot of expectations again, just because Clint did knock it out of the park. He finally listened to all the people that complained over the years that he washed out his color palette too much and things like that. So he didn't wash out the color palette, but unfortunately there's some other problems that we ran into along the way with this movie. So I guess going over my positive and negatives, if I can speak correctly here. Going over the things that do work in Cry Macho, I think Clint and this kid that he retrieves down in Mexico have good chemistry. They have some interesting conversations every once in a while. I think the kid does learn from Clint for the most part. He learns not to drink and not to get into trouble and all that kind of stuff. The two of them have great chemistry. That part of the film was not an issue. I enjoyed seeing these two characters on screen with each other. Another thing I think that worked in the movie was Clint Eastwood's love interest, Marta, I think her name was. She's basically this chef in a small Mexican restaurant somewhere. I think it really shows kind of the softer side of Clint Eastwood. I think the romance, for the most part, works. Obviously, Clint probably is a little too old for this woman. She is of an older age. She is a grandmother. She is a widow. I did see a couple reviews online. People like, oh, he's way too old for her and things like that. I think as far as a script goes and as a movie goes, they have good screen chemistry once again. So once again, Clint has great screen chemistry with almost every person he seems to interact with on camera. But whether it's him and this kid that he has to bring back to the U.S. or this woman that he falls in love with down in Mexico, we always kind of see the more fragile, softer side of Clint Eastwood every once in a while. And I think that part of this film worked for the most part. And once again, Clint did avoid washing out his color palette. He uses a more colorful color palette this time around. You can see the brightness of the sun and the sundown. You can see the desert colors. You could see the blueness of the cars. You could see all the colors of the restaurant when they're in the restaurant. So basically, color palette wise, no issues at all. He avoided washing out the color palette once again. I admire that he acknowledged that criticism over the years, that he did not apply it to this film or Richard Jewell. So once again, he avoided using that. Thumbs up in my book as far as that part of the film goes. And overall, there is some small interesting moments in this movie. I would say for the most part, some of the more interesting conversations for me personally that happen in the movie is when Clint and this kid are around a campfire and they're talking about life, they're talking about being macho and how overrated it can be sometimes and things like that. Some interesting things also happen while they're at a fireplace in certain moments that I don't want to give away. But for the most part, some of the more interesting moments happen when the film kind of just focuses on these two guys getting back to the U.S., kind of them vocally expressing how they feel on certain things. Probably one of the better aspects of the film. But for my negatives of Cry Macho, unfortunately, one thing that Clint did not acknowledge, unfortunately, with this film, he brought it back again after knocking it out of the park with Richard Jewell, but not doing it this time around, is this film, unfortunately, is very slow-paced. It's a very, very slow movie. It's only an hour and 44 minutes for the runtime of this. This film feels so much longer than that. It's extremely slow-paced. One criticism I saw online for this movie was it almost feels like the film's told in slow motion, and sometimes it does. It's a very, very slow-paced movie. Really would have preferred a much quicker pace for this story. And also, for the most part, this is a very bare-bone, basic story. Like that synopsis I brought up earlier, that's really all that happens event-wise in this movie. Just Clint going down to Mexico, getting this kid, making sure he gets back to the father in the U.S., and that really is the only major event that happens in this movie. Everything else is just kind of things that happen, and they're not really events. And there's even one negative criticism I have here in a minute that's kind of the most tenseful moment of the movie, and it's really nothing much. But yeah, this is a very bare-bone, basic story that really could have conceptually used a lot of work. And like I said, this is really not a very eventful movie. It really felt very slow. I really felt like there was a lot of moments where there was really nothing happening at all. Yeah, it's just, I really think more things needed to happen in this movie, especially if you're run for a good an hour and 44 minutes. Something interesting has to happen along the way. Some of the tenser moments also in this movie, whenever it does try to build up something tense, almost have no follow-up at all. I guess the best example of this is there's a scene where you think the whole Clint bringing this kid back to the U.S. thing is going to really start to get more tense. There's this intense phone call he has with the friend, finds out things about the kid, finds out some things that might not make the kid want to come back to the U.S. with him and things like that. And it just has no follow-up. Like there's literally one conversation in a car that happens where the kid expresses, "Oh, I'm unhappy that happened, and I'm unhappy that you handled it that way," and things like that. But there's really not any follow-up. Like when Clint sees his friend again, there's just nothing. There's nothing. Like it almost felt like that tense conversation we saw earlier in the film didn't happen at all. It's just mission accomplished, and I guess we're good. So there's just a lot of things here where you feel like it's setting up for something tense, and there's just no follow up to it at all. And unfortunately, that one example I just listed is one of many examples of this film. Just like, where was the follow up to that tense thing that happened earlier in the movie? Um, Also, this is just not a great return to the Western setting, unfortunately. It is Clint Eastwood. It is in the Western genre. It is taking place in the West. This should have been great. It really should have been great. And unfortunately, Clint's return to the West is just kind of not so good this time around, unfortunately. And going back to talking about tense moments from the movie again, probably one of the most tense moments in this movie, and it's not really that much of an intense moment, really, is somebody who's trying to kill both Clint and this kid gets attacked by a rooster. That's like the most intense moment in this movie. So, unfortunately, Cry Macho, really not a very eventful movie. I really was kind of not super impressed with this one. After knocking it out of the park with Richard Jewell, Clint kind of goes back to some former criticisms that he's ignoring again. And I really wish him the best of luck in his next project, whatever that might be. Cry Macho, unfortunately, is not quite the masterpiece I was hoping to be, though. So I would probably give Cry Macho a 7.5 out of 10. I think there's things about it that are okay. I think there's things about it that would make an okay Redbox rental if you really are pressed to rent something at Redbox one night on a rainy day. But it's a very slow paced movie. It's really not very eventful. It's a very bare bone, basic story. Some of the tenser moments have no follow up at all to them. Um, this is not a great return for Clint Eastwood with the Western genre, and like I said, the most intense moment in the movie is a rooster attack. So 7.5 out of 10 for me. It's an okay movie. Not one of Clint's better films, unfortunately. It's not quite Hereafter bad or 15 to 17 to Paris kind of bad, but it's certainly not great. Cry Macho is an okay movie. It's a red box rental at best.